All right, guys, this is Greg Collins, the church debater, and preacher Mike. Mike, how you doing today?
Man, I'm ready. I'm ready. Got a new haircut, so I'm
Yeah,
feeling
yeah,
good,
yeah.
looking
You
good.
got that preacher haircut, man.
Yeah.
All right, let me tell everybody first of all that I posted the link to this last week's episode in several different places, and I know we've got more viewers this week. So in fact, in the first week that it was out, it got more views than any other episode we've had in its first week. So
On the
since
new
we've got
link.
more, go ahead
On the new link.
on the link, just
Oh,
the new places more so than the
got
new
you.
link.
Got you.
So I would encourage everybody, we want this to be evangelistic. And the way YouTube works, the more views and especially the more thumbs up that you click. If there's a little thumb underneath the YouTube video, if you click the thumbs up, then YouTube's algorithm will show it to more people. So that's how we can turn this into an evangelistic tool. So
Cool. All right.
keep that in mind, and hopefully we'll continue to grow.
Yeah.
All right. Here we go. One follow-up question to last week. In fact, it's really just rereading a verse that you brought up yourself.
Okay.
Romans 12:1 about worship. Therefore, this is New International Version, and I'm reading from this version on purpose. Therefore, I urge you, brothers and sisters, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. That is your true and proper worship. As you mentioned last week, some versions, such as the New King James, uses the word service instead of
Right.
worship. So
Right.
I was curious. I looked at probably three of the more popular ones, NIV, English Standard, and New American Standard. They all say worship. In fact, New King James is one of the few that says service. So I guess my question is, why do you think the versions have translated that in a different way? And how do we know which one is the better translation?
Well, that's a fair question. I think that the oftentimes translational differences are bias related. That often is the case.
Right.
Now, I don't know that this is a bias related. I was looking up right now, in fact, trying to see that and how many different ones right quickly that I could show or say make one or the other. But I think that my opinion is that a lot of people don't see when I said bias, I'm not sure that people are trying to figure out how to make it be that way.
Sure.
But rather, they just haven't thought about the difference between service and worship, meaning they don't, they're not as keen on the idea that worship is a segmented part of our lives. And they get that from Colossians 4, for instance, whatever you do, do all to the glory of God. And so if you're
Right.
doing anything to the glory of God, you're obviously worshiping him. Well, I don't think that applies in a specific, but in a general way. And I think that's how people are thinking. So if you're a good employer, you're glorifying God by being a good employer
Good.
or employee
Or teacher.
or a teacher. That's
Right.
exactly right. It doesn't matter what you're doing. Just whatever if you're doing it and it's God approved, you're glorifying him by the way you do it. But it is not necessarily the case that we could say that you are worshiping him through that. So I think probably it is the common use of the word worship that puts it in there,
Right.
so that it is a common understood thing that all of life is worship. There are some who have bought into that for the purpose of pushing an agenda, but there are some who just don't think about it. I think that's the case.
Gotcha. Gotcha. All right. Sounds good. One thing I want to go into before we leave John 9, we started with John 9 when we were talking about worship.
Right.
I don't know about you, but one of the most repulsive things that I've ever seen in a baseball game. Me and you are both baseball fans. We're both Cardinal fans, and I'm a Reds fan too, but they're usually out of it by now. So.
And they are.
Yeah, they are. They are. And what I think it was one of the Alomar players once spit in the face of a referee, or an umpire, I should say, on the field. And I've heard people say one of the most repulsive things you can do to someone else is spit in their face.
Mm-hmm.
So what I want to do is reread John 9, verses 6 and 7, when Jesus created the mud.
Yep.
And ask you a question about it. It
All
says, after saying this, he, referring to Jesus, spit on the ground, made some mud with the saliva, and put it on the man's eyes. Go, he told him, wash in the pool of Siloam. This word means sent. So the man went and washed and came home seeing. So my question is this. Did Jesus, of course, Jesus could have done anything he wanted to, but if did Jesus do this because there wasn't any convenient water? Did he do this? Now I'm being sarcastic.
Mm-hmm.
Did he do it because the guy was blind and figured he wouldn't know anyway? Or was he using the spit as an additional lesson to this healing?
I can safely say, Greg Collins, that question has never been asked to me
You
before.
know, I was hoping that. I honestly thought I want to hit Mike with something that he's never heard before. So I'm glad you said that.
I have never even had anybody question that.
But I can't take full credit. It came up on another show. So,
okay. Well, I would say this. It caused my mind to think of a similar, notice, event.
Okay.
That we may all have participated in. I remember, how many mothers have you seen that they see something on their child's cheek and they take their finger to their tongue and then they wipe it off?
They wouldn't do it to their teenage child, though.
Well, I don't know. I'm not sure about that. Moms are going to be moms, you know. I think my mom would still do it if she saw something. So that's it. It sort of reminded me of that, meaning what do you have at hand to take care of the situation?
Right.
I mean, when I see Jesus do some things that he does, we all know that there are times he does things in a miraculous way. But for instance, when in the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, all right, did he need the 5 loaves and the 2 fish to feed the people bread and fish? No.
Right.
He could have created them miraculously.
Right.
But he used what he had. Now, to wonder why he thought he needed mud, obviously he didn't. But I'm also thinking a second point seems to apply to these. Not only does he use what's at hand, but number 2, he does things to get a response from the person.
Yes.
And by allowing that to happen, sending him off to wash his eyes and then to come back, was that man's investment in the process.
No doubt.
So I would say that the answer is twofold. Jesus uses what's at hand, and he wants a response from the person with whom he is working. And that combination does about the best to answer those things I can think of.
Okay. What about to the disciples that were standing around, or to anybody that was standing around?
Good. It certainly was a help to them, a teaching point for them too. Yep, that's right.
All right.
Very good. Wow. I tell you.
All right. Now, I was trying to think if I had ever heard you speak about insects in one of your sermons, but I came across a verse. I'm going to read a verse about gnats here in a minute.
Okay.
And it just got me curious of the times that insects are mentioned in the Bible. So I've got some questions that are insect based to go forward.
This program is going to go down in history.
All right. All right. That's
Questions
what
I
I
have
was
never
hoping.
ever been asked or thought of.
Yes. Oh, you've thought of these. You're going
Okay.
to think, you've thought of the questions I'm going to ask you.
Okay.
Matthew 23. I'll start with 23. We'll read 23
Mhm.
and 24.
Yep.
Woe to you, in fact, yeah, this is good. Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites. You give a tenth of your spices, mint, dill, and cumin, but you have neglected the more matters of the law, justice, mercy, and faithfulness. You should have practiced the latter without neglecting the former. And, he's blistering them all through Matthew 23.
That's right.
The verse 24 then says, you blind guides, you strain out a gnat, but swallow a camel. What in the world does that mean?
Well, at least you've asked me a question that I've dealt with before.
I figured you
Finally.
had. Oh, it's going to get worse, though.
Oh, I have no doubt. That's why I'm going to get this one in while I can. Maybe drag it out. All right. The point that he's making with the Pharisees in verse 23, he explains in 24. They are so tied to the details of the law, the making sure that if you have a plant of some kind of herb in your garden and it's this big, did you go out and pinch off one leaf for 1/10 of it to be given?
Right.
And yet they don't even recognize when they, in their use of, and I think the text even talks about it here, their use of the word Corban, so that they don't have to take care of their parents by saying, we took our money and dedicated it to the Lord, so now I don't have to take care of you in your old age.
Gotcha.
You were so concerned about the leaf of an herb, but you were unconcerned about caring for your parents. So to strain at a gnat is to choke on the smallest thing,
Right.
while fully engulfing the big thing.
Okay. All right. I thought, and maybe you've changed my mind now, I thought it was going to be similar to a speck of dust in your eye or in someone else's eye and a plank in your eye. So that's not really the exact same meaning.
I don't think so. I think what he's saying is that, yeah, he's saying it, you can be so legalistic and so Pharisaic about those small things, and yet you miss. It's the difference between the letter of the law and the spirit of the law, and they totally miss the spirit.
All right.
Yep.
All right. Let's go back to Leviticus, all the way back to Leviticus 11.
All right.
All flying insects that walk on all fours are to be regarded as unclean by you. There are, however, some flying insects that walk on all fours that you may eat. Those that have jointed legs or hopping on the ground. Of these, you may eat any kind of locust, katydid, and I don't think that's the caramel kind, cricket, and grasshopper. But all other flying insects that have 4 legs, you are to regard as unclean. Here's my question. I don't know about you. I have eaten grasshoppers, which by this verses are clean. I have eaten crickets in the form of chips, actually, that was made from crickets. I've always said that I'm not athletic enough to be on Survivor, but if they had a designated eater, I would try anything. That wouldn't bother me. But my question is this. As you read that list, the same ones that God says are clean versus unclean are really the ones today that you would think of as healthy versus unhealthy. Do you think that the only reason God put or made these laws were so that they could practice their obedience, or did he also take into effect, you're going to get sick if you eat of these unclean bugs. What do you think? Was there more to it than just being a law that they had to follow?
Oh, I definitely think that it was more, but it also included that. Again, we're still talking about the same thing, the letter of the law versus the spirit of the law.
Right.
There was a book written called None of These Diseases. And it's a book taken from Leviticus because God said, if you will do what I tell you to do, then none of these diseases that these other nations have had will come to you. God would take care of them.
Right. Good.
Now, the idea that happened here in all of these laws certainly was God's in charge, and he said, this is what I want you to do. The difference between that and the same thing today that someone might do is that God didn't just randomly select in order to prove his dominance. You do this because I said to.
Right.
I believe what God did was to devise a system for people to live then and now that not only represents what he wants, but also is the best for us anyway. Meaning, I've said many times that if it were the fact that God did not exist, it is still my contention that what the Bible teaches is the best way to live on this planet.
I'm glad you said that because I've got a thought to close the show today that's very similar to that. Keep going.
Well, I think that's what he's doing. And I think he is certainly exercising his authority, but he's also saying, plus the fact, this is better for you to eat these things or not to eat these things. In fact, I think, I may be wrong, but I think what the difference is between those insects, the difference between insects that feast on dead things versus insects that don't.
Good. That's good.
I think that's what he's talking about. And so he would keep them from, because the very next verse, 24, begins talking about, by these you shall become unclean. Whoever touches the carcass of any of them shall be unclean. And he goes on and talks about later on death. And so you can't, a carcass, see, a dead body. And I think those insects that end up being on those bodies,
good point,
be unclean.
Good. By the way, have you eaten a grasshopper?
Do not think so. I don't think so.
They're actually a delicacy in many countries.
Oh, I know. I've heard that.
Right. And you can buy them chocolate covered. I mean, they're very high in protein.
And do they look like grasshoppers? I mean, the whole thing?
Well, yeah, they do. But anyway.
Wow.
Now you know I'm even stranger than you ever thought I was.
It's wow.
All right, let's go to our next insect here.
Okay.
Proverbs 6:6.
Mm-hmm.
Go to the ant, you sluggard. Consider its ways and be wise. It has no commander, no overseer or ruler. Yet it stores its provisions in the summer and gathers its food at harvest. And a little side note, you always see ants carrying things around that are just huge. And so I looked it up. Scientists say that an ant can actually carry, get this, 5,000 times its weight. 5,000.
Wow.
That's crazy. I've seen an ant carrying almost a full potato chip that I dropped one time.
Yeah.
I mean, it is insane. But what's the meaning of that verse? Go to the ant, you sluggard, consider its ways and be wise.
Did you ever, as a kid, have an ant farm?
Yes. In the glass?
Yeah.
Behind the glass, I did.
Yeah. Most of us have been familiar with that kind of thing. And you notice that they work and work and work. And I wonder if ants ever have recreational time.
You're right. You're right. That's a good point.
And so I think what he's saying is, you're lazy. Now, the ant is not lazy. Of all the things you can say, ants are not lazy. One of the reasons I know that is because they can get into a house in no time. In no time.
Oh, I'll give you a story. You finish yours, and then I'll tell you mine.
Yeah, they send out those scouts, man, that find out where all the sweet
That's
stuff
crazy,
is.
isn't it? That's crazy.
It's amazing. And that, I think, is a part of this. He's simply saying ants are not lazy. If you want to learn how not to be lazy, go look at the ants. They take care of themselves. They work hard. Everybody has it's a very defined society. There are those that do certain jobs and those that do others.
Right.
He's just talking about lazy versus work.
In fact, most people call them ant colonies, and you think
colonies, that's right.
Yeah, you think of them all just working in a colony. So
right.
I agree with that. You know, I told you I was going to tell you a story, and now I think I've completely forgotten it. So
it's about ants being able to get into the house quicker than anything you can think.
Oh, yes. You know, you don't think you have ants in your house. I see ants in my driveway,
right.
But you know, have your grandkids over and let them drop one piece of Captain Crunch, and you wait and see if you don't have ants on that.
They just know.
Yeah, and their sense of smell is extremely keen as well. So, all right, we've got two more, and I think, and yes, you're probably expecting me to eventually get to the plagues, and I will get there, but. Let's go to Ecclesiastes 10:1.
Yeah.
As dead flies give perfume a bad smell, so a little folly outweighs wisdom and honor. First of all, what in the world does that mean? And is a fly the most repulsive insect that we have on God's green earth?
You know, I would say that there are certain people that you could ask, my wife being one, that absolutely that's the worst insect on the planet, a fly.
Yeah. And it carries disease sometimes. Oh, man. You know, mosquitoes do too. Those are probably the biggest disease carriers, but go ahead.
And of course, you remember the movie The Fly with Jeff Goldblum. I mean, that was very, very indicative of the grotesqueness of it.
Yes, and that was a remake of a much milder version from about the 40s or 50s, I think.
Oh, okay. Yeah. All right. So I would say that flies are drawn to the sweet smelling things anyway. And so perfumer's ointment draws them in, but they die. It's just like, you know, those sticky tapes that people put up for flies?
Yes.
That's the same thing. They get in there and they can't get out. So what happens? They die in the stuff. And that contaminates the whole bottle if you leave it open. You know, it's one of those things that I want to get someday is a cap to put on a can of soda, because bees or flies can get down in there, and then they're in there, and then you go to drink and you get your tongue stung, you know.
Right.
If they get in the sweet stuff, they can't get out, and so I think that's what's going on here. And so I think he's simply saying, then don't let, he goes on to say, so does a little folly to one respected for wisdom and honor. In other words, you might be a very well-respected person, but one little problem can cause a deal. One little problem can bring you down. One little fly can mess up an entire ointment of perfume. Just be careful. You're always susceptible in that way. I think that's what he said.
Good. Yeah, I like that. By the way, you mentioned bees. I will go ahead and mention that I've always heard, and again, this is from the scientific world, but I think it's true, that of all the insects, perhaps bees are the ones that we can least live without.
Yes.
Because if they stop pollinating, we stop breathing and everything else. So it would be like a domino effect if we had no more bees. So that's crazy to even think about. All right.
Britt and Harold would agree with that.
Yes. Oh, and I've had their honey. Their honey is good. The plagues involved three of the plagues involved insects. Mm-hmm. Comment on those. Why do you think God chose those three? Flies. Go ahead.
Locusts. Yeah, flies, locusts, and gnats.
Gnats,
yes.
Flies,
I think it's the three. Isn't that right?
I think so. I'll look it up. I just had looked it up. My memory is terrible. It's not moths, although there's probably if you look at just glancing through it, moths might be mentioned as much as any insect in the Bible, because it talks about moths destroying
Right. That's right.
things.
That's right.
But why do you think those were the three insects? Are they the most repulsive of all the insects on Earth?
No, I think it's because it's lice.
Lice,
Lice.
that's right. That's right. Lice are repulsive.
They are.
Flies are repulsive. The locusts might have been more because of just how they destroy crops and everything. Now go ahead.
Well, here's what I know for absolute certain, and that is God sent these 9 because each one of them was the symbol of one of their gods.
Yes, good point. Good point.
So he was trying to he was showing the Egyptians that God is greater than their gods. So that's a fact. All right. Why did he choose these? I think it's because of their predominance. Again, using what's at hand. They were accustomed to locusts, still are in that country, back and forth. You have locust plagues all the time. Lice and lice get on people, and in their hair. We have all that.
Oh yeah,
stuff all the time. Lice in the head.
used to be in the schoolrooms much more than it is now, but it still happens today.
I think those 3 just represent they're things that everybody can relate to, and each of them. How in the world you could worship a God whose symbol is lice? I don't know, but that's what they did.
Right, right.
So I think that's what's going on.
Okay. Let me close with this. No more bugs, but I couldn't help but think this. I told you about a book written by Bill Nye that I had to stop reading last week.
Yep.
I like some of his TV shows. They're fine. But you know his stance on evolution.
Yep.
And he was very flippant throughout the book. I just had this thought. I want to see what you think of this thought. If you're talking to an atheist, and they're refusing to believe anything that's in the Bible, what if you told them, listen, let's set some of the Bible aside for now. What do you think of the parts of the Bible that just talks about the plan of salvation and love? Do you not like those parts either?
That's a great question. I just finished a book on that very topic. A fellow friend of mine that taught me at graduate school wrote a book on Christian evidences as an evangelistic approach.
Good.
His point was find some place of common ground and stand there.
Yes, I agree.
And I loved his thought.
Yes, and I always use the sarcastic example. You can't smack somebody in the head with your Bible and expect them to pay attention to you.
That's exactly
you
right.
have to, Jesus, he usually fulfilled a need.
That's right.
Before he talked about their spiritual situation. He might have healed them. He might have gave them a drink. He might have washed their feet. Anything like that before he got into the lesson that he really. So why not us try that approach too? Have somebody over for a meal, and when we feel like they're ready, maybe it's going to take 2 or 3 times.
That's right.
When we feel like they're ready, talk to them about Jesus is the way I feel about it.
I'm on board with that. That's my
all right.
I love it.
Close us out. What's the smartest thing you can think of to get us through this next week?
Well, I don't know about the smartest thing to get us through, but I can tell you the smart thing that I learned. I'm going to do a series of lessons on lessons from God through the insects.
Even if you're being sarcastic, I like it.
I'm not being sarcastic.
Good.
I'm going to do it. I think
my mind works in such strange ways. I think I have such strange thoughts that's why the kids in school like me, because there was one day in school that they got me talking about something. And before I knew it, we had 10 minutes in class left, and I don't know how much of their lesson they had done. But anyway, I might be in trouble this year. I don't know. But I'll see one verse about bugs, and I'll think, man, how many stories are there about bugs in here? Or how many stories are there about mud and using spit in the Bible. And I just think of things like that.
Hey, I'm going to do it. You watch.
All right. Good, good, good. I get the assist. I get the
Yes, you
assist.
do. I'll do a thumbs up.
Yeah, it's a thumbs up. You guys remember to do your thumbs up. By the way, you can email us at churchdebater@gmail.com. Make sure you watch and give us a thumbs up. And Mike, we will see you next Sunday.
Yes, sir, buddy. Thank
All
you.
right, man.
Bye-bye.
All right, I'm talking. We're still recording because I couldn't find my button. I can clip the end of it.